Hey everyone, it's been over 2 minutes and I haven't been raped yet. And I'd like to report that to the Department of Justice. Hi, I'm Diana Davison, a civil rights activist and co-founder of the Lighthouse Project, helping the falsely accused and wrongfully convicted get access to justice. Part of that work requires addressing the failings of our current legal system in an era of #believing women when they claim to have been sexually assaulted. Now, I'm going to be talking about the sex in a box nonsense in a moment, but first a bit of news on what the public can do to protest the growing violations of due process in sexual assault trials. I just got back from a trip to Toronto where I had a number of meetings with lawyers and have been formulating a plan on how to protect the rights of the accused. I'm not a big fan of petitions, mostly because I don't think they accomplish anything, and I don't think protests are effective unless you have thousands turn out, or devoted activists who will maintain a lengthy protest, say, camping out on the steps of parliament buildings for a week. But I have discovered that there is a call for submissions to the Department of Justice in Canada, and I'm crafting my submission with the help of some of those lawyers that I've met. The submissions are open to Canadian public, so anyone wanting to add their voice, who's Canadian, this is a much better opportunity than signing something on change.org. But you need to follow the rules of engagement and research the topics that you address before crafting your response. Basically, saying, "I've got a big old donkey," is not going to achieve the desired results. So, I'll tell you some of the problems that need to be addressed, and this is specific to Canadian law, but has much in common with other countries.
You know what? No, we're not in Australia.
Understand what is called the twin myths. The twin part of this expression describes two lines of reasoning that are forbidden in the courts, namely that a woman is more likely to have consented or less worthy of belief, but the myths that are claimed are quite numerous. Now, all judges and lawyers agree that prior sexual experience or history of a complainant should not be used to argue either of those two lines of reasoning, but there is much debate over interpretation of what's covered by prior sexual history. Primarily, the intent is to say that it doesn't matter how many sexual partners a woman may have had, it doesn't mean that they wanted sex or that they would be lying about it. Judges don't want to discuss the woman's sexual history at all because doing so is believed to create prejudice against the woman. I want to point something out right now. I've been in court and heard prosecutors arguing that the complainant was less likely to consent because she had no prior sexual history. So that's point number one. Prosecutors in these cases, they lead evidence in court. They go first and they present their case that there was a sexual assault. They should be barred from adducing evidence of naivety or sexual inexperience because they will immediately object if the defense tries to rebut that evidence. I recently attended a trial where the prosecutor did exactly that. She established in her examination in chief that the accuser was a virgin in order to argue that the woman was less likely to have consented to sexual activity. So here's where we get into the sex in a box analogy. Imagine you're on a jury for a sexual assault trial. The prosecutor is going to stop you from hearing evidence from defense, and I want you to think about what you need to know to make a decision about two strangers, people you don't know, and what you think they did inside of a room with no witnesses. She says it was something like this. He says it was more like this. Or maybe he says she wasn't even there. The problem is, as a jury member, you can't see in the box because no one else was there. Now, people ask me all the time, how can I tell that someone's falsely accused when I decide who I'm going to help? You need to know the people involved. When I feel like I've learned about the characters in the story to the point where I'm correctly guessing other details about them which I can confirm, then I turn to the allegation of what she says happened. I look for consistency and natural flow to the story that fits with what I know about the two people involved. Then I listen to his version of events and look for consistency with what I know about the two people involved. Then I look to whether or not there's anything that corroborates either side in the external evidence that's available. The entire time, I will be affected by any evidence of a lie from either side about any part of the story. So when a guy asks for my help, if he lies or conceals something from me, well, I'm not going to be his advocate. When the woman lies or conceals something from the police, judge, or jury, she should not be believed for the same reasons. So that's how fact-finding works. So if you're not well versed in law, don't try to fake it. Just write your submission from the point of view of a future jury member and the concerns that you have about information being withheld from you. That's what they try to do with these rape shield laws. As a responsible member of the public, you should be horrified at the prospect of wrongfully convicting an innocent man. The more they withhold from you as a jury member, the more likely that outcome is. We're being asked to decide what happened in that closed box. So we need to decide what happened in the precise area to which we are blind. And advocates for sexual assault victims, who should be called complainants, they're saying that we have no right to know how those people got into the box in the first place or what they did afterwards. Any such inquiry is called victim blaming. Well, I call it fact-finding. So the next problem is the fraudulent experts on so-called rape trauma theory. These people are called to bolster the credibility of accusers when they act in ways that undermine their credibility. They're basically like goalies trying to keep the defense from scoring a point in the fact-finding mission. She sent a text asking the guy to have sex with her that night? Well, that's consistent with rape. She thanked him for a great night afterwards on email? Well, that's consistent with rape. She proposed marriage and said, "Can you do that to me every night?" Consistent with rape. None of these frauds can tell the jury what would be inconsistent with rape, and that should be part of the test for bias before their testimony is allowed anywhere near a courtroom. There was an excellent article written by Emily Yoffe last week debunking rape trauma theory and claims about memory after rape that intend to explain away all problems in the complainant's testimony. On the surface, it's kind of silly that anyone believes this trauma theory anyway, because the so-called experts say that the women can't remember that night because of trauma, but then they tell us that these women have PTSD because of the memories. You know, those things they don't have. Aside from that stupidity, these experts are using the phrase tonic immobility to explain why the woman didn't say no or attempt to stop the sexual activity. This is a phenomenon noted in rodents, snakes, some sharks, and chickens. So this is a chicken. I would like to see the studies in which they pin a woman down, a human being, and draw a chalk line on the ground in front of her to see what happens. Nothing these rape trauma spokespeople say actually meshes with what actual trauma experts have found. From Emily Yoffe's article, which I recommend you read in full, neuroscience research does not support the claim that high levels of stress hormones impair memory for traumatic experience. In fact, it's almost the opposite. Extreme stress enhances memory for the central aspects of an overwhelming emotional experience. When humans actually do freeze in the midst of a mortality threat, it normally lasts for a few seconds, and the purpose of this is to determine the best course of action. Are they going to dive under a chair, or are they going to run? More and more, I'm seeing sexual assault complainants describing this faux rape trauma theory while giving their testimony. They're being coached, either by their victim advocates or by the prosecutor. I have actually seen a complainant pause mid-sentence during her testimony, look at the prosecutor for approval, and then complete her sentence. And that brings me to the next point: prosecutorial misconduct in our legal system. I have witnessed a prosecutor refusing to gather evidence or call witnesses which she knew would undermine her case. This prosecutor has built her case on hearsay evidence and refused to call material witnesses. I'm going to be crafting a complaint to the Law Society about this particular prosecutor tomorrow, but I can tell you that if anything is done in response, the response will not be public information, and if there is any punitive action, it'll be insignificant. More about this later, but you should include in your submissions to the DOJ that we need to increase transparency for the prosecutor's office and greater concern about who qualifies as an expert. And, again, saying something like,
"You reckon if I let you suck my that I could get a fair trial here?
Will not achieve the desired outcome. Now, there's a lot more I'd like to report this week, some of which I can't because it's currently before the courts, but some of which simply requires its own video. I'm considering doing more than one video per week, but I need your support on Patreon so we can get to a point where I can hire another full-time researcher for the Lighthouse Project. It took a long time for our legal system to become corrupt, and it'll take a lot of work to reverse it. I get a lot done every week, but we need more. So that's it for now, and I really hope that people are too busy writing their submissions to ask me in the comments section why it is I own Smurfs.